what's up everybody? Chad Kalick here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast, where on this episode, we're going to talk about the bizarre lore surrounding Billy Corgan's claims to have witnessed a shapeshifter twice, in which, although he has not publicly stated who the identity is of this shapeshifter, he has left some breadcrumbs. And recently, on another YouTube channel, someone came forward with a story that allegedly revealed the name of who the shapeshifter is. And oddly enough, I believe it to be true, and I have some very weird and odd historical connections to this lore, and I will kind of walk you down that rabbit hole. I do want to say that all of it is alleged and it's stories. I don't know Billy Corgan personally, but I certainly knew people in his atmosphere, and I will explain how these stories came to me before they were just made public. So, let's get into it. First and foremost, you really have to understand how local music scenes work. They are built upon legend and lore. I come from the Des Moines, Iowa local music scene, and if you went back there today, there are many people in the local watering holes that would tell you all kinds of legends and all kinds of lore associated with Slipknot and 35-inch Mutter and our battles and wars that we had, and Stone Sour and all these bands that have gone to do interesting stuff, obviously Slipknot being massive. But that legend and lore is what later drives bands to want to be bands. It's a really cool thing about local music scenes. And once you kind of get to the top of your local music scene, meaning once you start booking and selling out your own shows, the natural progression is to go to other music scenes and start swapping shows with other bands that are doing well as well. And this definitely happened to my band. We were very fortunate, and we started playing Minneapolis a lot, Omaha a lot, and Chicago a lot. We actually opened up for Disturbed in a band called From Zero from Chicago at the Metro. We played the Double Door. There's a whole circuit of clubs that you play. And when you do, you just meet a lot of people from that local music industry. And some of those people have remained my friends. And I would always hear stories about Billy Corgan and just how interesting he was. Nothing about any shapeshifter or anything like that. Just that he was a really interesting guy, and we had played different clubs that they had played, and everybody, had their Smashing Pumpkins story. Now, fast forward to 2006. I had finished playing with my band. I was working in band management. I was living in Los Angeles, and I had begun making documentaries. One of the earlier projects that I worked on, I got very fortunate, and I was able to work with Steven Spielberg on a project called Rising that was at Yahoo. At that time, a gentleman named Terry Simmel was the head of Yahoo. It was a weird time for the industry because everybody saw the writing on the wall. They saw that TV was going to be dying and that programming would exist on the web. And it was right before that really hit. There were a lot of different programs and shows that were trying to be something online. Advertisers were just then deciding, are we going to dump millions of dollars into online shows rather than television? It was a really weird time. But I worked there for 2 years, between 2006 and 2008. When 2008 hit, it was right in the middle of us filming this Rising show, which was going to be a really kind of new age, new level of technology ghost hunting show that would have been released on Yahoo Originals. When 2008 hit, if you guys remember, there was a massive recession and the stock market cratered. It was crazy. When that happened, a lot of shows lost their underwriters and marketing dollars, and no one really knew what to do at that time. When that happened, I thought I was going to be let go because our show no longer was in Yahoo's focus, and the president of Yahoo, Terry Simmel, had left. Turns out Terry Simmel's company, Windsor Media, was interested in keeping the show. So for the next 2 years, they had me on a contract where it was literally just a retainer contract where they were paying me to not do anything until they were ready to go film the show or until they decided what they were going to do with this project. But what I learned at that time is that Terry Semel has a really powerful reputation. He was a massive Hollywood figure. He was a billionaire, just a really powerful guy. And a really nice guy, too, and a very interesting guy. In fact, the office they had for me literally sat right across from his office, so I could see him every day in there, and I would talk to him in passing. He was a really cool guy. Now, I will come back later on to tell you why this is all interesting, in connection to the Billy Corgan lore. Okay, so 2017 hits, and I'm watching, Howard Stern and Rogan, and on 2 different times I see that Billy Corgan brings up this shape-shifting thing, where he talks about the fact that he's seen a shapeshifter on 2 different occasions. And if you guys Google this right now or search it on YouTube, it'll come right up. Just type in Billy Corgan shapeshifter and you can watch it. I'm not going to put the clips on here because every time I do, shit just gets demonetized and it's just a serious pain in the ass. But you can just search it, Billy Corgan shapeshifter, and you can watch it. And you'll see he's very, very adamant about what he saw, that he saw a shapeshifter on not only 1 occasion, but 2. And he kind of leaves a detail, I believe it's on Stern, where he talks about how he saw this shapeshifter naked. Which I'm like, huh. So it would lead me to believe that he had a personal relationship with this person. So anyways, as a total Hail Mary, just out of general interest, I called a friend of mine in Chicago that I knew had worked in the local music scene forever. And I just asked him, hey man, have you ever heard any lore surrounding Billy Corgan and like a shapeshifter? And he was like, what defines shapeshifter? And I was like, I don't know, like body or face, gets distorted or something just really, shapeshifter. That's how he described it. And he said, actually, there is a story surrounding him, but he basically said he thought that Billy described it as this was a girl and she was a demon. And he really believed that she was because he said that her face became something else. So he ends up telling me that this person's name. And oddly enough, it's Tia Tequila. Now, the only reason I knew who Tia Tequila was is because the same time when I first started working for Yahoo at that time, and then later worked for Terry Semel, she was a big deal in the sense that her and the Hollywood Undead were like the first 2 musical acts, or the first 2 acts that were putting out music on MySpace that the industry was willing to kind of give them a shot and see if they could parlay that into an actual career. The music side did not work for Tia Tequila. It did work for Hollywood Undead. And Tia Tequila had a long career in reality TV. I'd say long, but I don't know, 5-6 years. But anyways, she was a really unique and interesting girl, a strange girl, and later had a lot of really strange stories. So when I first heard this, and he told me this, I asked him a few more questions about the story, my friend in Chicago, and he didn't have like all the detail that this other YouTube channel has. Which, in fact, I will put that channel's link in the description box below for you guys to check it out. Now, according to this gentleman on his channel, on this story, kind of the same thing. He knew somebody locally in the music scene that had the story. And what they claimed is that Billy was seeing Tia Tequila for a short time period. And during sex with her, she had this, dysmorphia, this weird facial thing that she did, and she became something non-human or something that he related to being demonic and different. But he said it was an actual physical change. And then the story that this gentleman had is that there was a second time where he left the room and came back to the room where she was having sex again, not with him, but he witnessed it, and he witnessed it again with her. And he firmly believed that this girl was a demon. And I was like, whoa, that's super. This stuff's weird because, again, the story I heard was shorter and less detailed. And this gentleman's story that just brought it out was very detailed and involved other people that were in Tia Tequila's life at that time. For example, she was seeing notably Sean Merriman for a while as a football player. But what I also found interesting is that once I heard this story, it reminded me this wasn't the first time that I had heard of Tila Tequila having something bizarre about her, something demonic or weird. Because when I was at Windsor Media working for Terry Simmel, for a minute, Tia was running around with his daughter. Terry Simmel has a daughter. Now, I didn't hear anything negative about Terry's daughter or anything like that. In fact, every encounter I had with Terry, like I said, he was an amazing dude and was just super cool. But because he was the big, powerful guy, in Hollywood, I mean, gossip is like a full-time job, especially for people working at like Yahoo and in media companies and things like that. So when Tia started hanging out with his daughter, I do remember a couple lunches where I was just hanging out with people that were working for the company as well. And they were talking about how they hoped that Terry's daughter was careful because the rumor is that he is some kind of demon, okay? Now, this was back in 2010. So this was, this thing with Billy and her was supposedly happened in 2009, okay? And this lined up, timeline-wise, where I was going, whoa, whoa. So not only did my old friend from the music scene say, yeah, I heard this story, but separately, while working for Windsor Media, when Tia Tequila started hanging out with Terry Simmel's daughter, I heard a similar story about this girl. Now, Tia Tequila later went on this really, really wild Hollywood vampire, Hollywood Illuminati type, these rants that she would go on about how she was going to, expose the truth about Hollywood and they were going to kill her. And one cult that I kept hearing the name of during that time period back in 2010 was the cult of Baal. And this is something you guys should know. This is something that you hear a lot in Hollywood. When I say the cult of Baal, it's B-A-apostrophe-A-L. I believe it's an old Canaanite deity. But it's basically interchangeably for a lot of people with the devil. It's a demon or a devil. And this cult of Baal is supposedly those who are in the Hollywood Illuminati supposedly pray to this deity, Baal. And it is I think it's a god of fertility. I shouldn't say it's a god, it's a deity of fertility that I think historically is given credit for leading the Israelites astray. I'd have to go, look that up in Grok right now. But my point being here, it's not to debate the historical accuracy of the cult of Baal. But the cult of Baal is a thing that you do consistently hear in Hollywood. That supposedly the Hollywood Illuminati, the evil elite, if you want to call it, the Hollywood vampires. This cult of Baal. The other time that I heard about this, and it was pretty quickly after I moved here. If you guys are a long-time listener of my podcast, you've heard me talk about my friend George. And unfortunately, George passed away a few years ago, and he was one of my favorite people, period, that I've ever met in my life. He was such a good guy, a positive guy, just so much positive energy. And he died very young, at 42 years old, of cancer. And it was aggressive. It just came on like crazy. But how I met George, oddly enough, I had a neighbor who was a massive Paranormal State fan. And my neighbor had a neighbor who had a friend that was a massive Paranormal State fan. That friend ended up being George. So my neighbor was like, you got to meet my buddy. I told him I live next to you. And he lost his mind. He has so many questions. And so, I just said, well, I'm going to stop by sometime. And George and I just hit it off. And it ended up leading to like, a very, very long friendship between he and I, where he was kind of like my dude that I would go down rabbit holes with all the time. But he was an extremely smart guy. Was a young entrepreneur. Grew up in Venice, which they referred to as Dogtown. He was tight with all the Z-Boys, the skateboarders, knew all those dudes. He was tight with all the guys in Suicidal Tendencies, which only bring this up because George was so nice on my birthday. He knew that one of my first concerts ever was Suicidal Tendencies. And he knew how much I love them. And he surprised me by taking me over to their house to meet all the guys, which was incredible. But anyways, George was really protective. And when Ryan was having a hard time, and I knew that he was staying up on the Hollywood Hills, I had lunch with George. And, we ended up talking about the hills and this cult of Baal thing he mentioned. And I said, Jesus, man, Ryan's up there. I need to just go up there and just drag him out of there, man. Like, that the whole thing just seems like bad news. And Ryan has, one day he will choose to speak upon some of the stuff I later learned from what kind of went on during his time up there. It's pretty horrifying stuff, but I don't want to speak for him. But I'll never forget that lunch of when I said, maybe I just need to go up there and drag him out of there. I mean, George, in the most serious way, was like, you can't go up there, Chad. And I'm like, well, no, I mean, I'll be okay, George. I mean, if I just know where he's at. And he's like, no, listen to me. He's like, you can't go up there. And I'm like, why? And he was like, man, there are monsters up there, dude. You don't understand. And I remember thinking in my head, are you using that like as a descriptive term? But he was saying it like, he was saying it different, And I just kind of looked at him seriously, and I kind of nodded my head and I said, okay, George. Kind of like, this is getting a little too heavy type of thing. And he looks at me and he goes, brother, I love you. And he had tears fill his eyes. And he goes, promise me right now, you will not go up into those hills. It just hit me like, why is this such a visceral response from him, So I said, yeah, and we ended up talking about it, God, for probably an hour. And he was talking about what's referred to as the Hollywood vampires or the Illuminati, and just how they're just collecting souls up there, that they are compromising people, they are hurting people, that there's murder, rape, just all kinds of shit that gets overlooked. And it was weird because, he had names. He had names of people that, again, I don't want to say, because it would literally, if it's true, it would put me in a bad spot, living here. But, he said this cult of Baal thing is real, and he definitely implied that there were monsters and demons and everything up in those hills. And I just thought it was really interesting that through a back channel of an old friend from Chicago, he had heard stuff about this Billy Corgan story with Tia Tequila. And then at a separate time, when I heard, unrelated, when I heard Tia Tequila's name come up while working, at Windsor Media, there were all kinds of people that were kind of just throwing out the warning of, Terry's daughter needs to really steer clear of this girl. They say there's something wrong with her. And that was weird too. I remember when that was brought up at that lunch, they were talking like, there's something different about her. And I was just thinking, what, like personality-wise or something? But they weren't talking like that. They were all talking like they knew something that I didn't, type of thing. Like there was more than just a personality issue. But yeah, it's really freaky stuff. So is Tia Tequila the shapeshifter that Billy Corgan has referenced on two different occasions? And look, obviously Billy wants us to come out to some degree. He's talking about it on Rogan and on Stern. Those are the two largest bullhorns you could have, right? To tell such a crazy story. But anyways, I would love to know what you guys think. Do you think this is the person that he's referencing? And just for the record, maybe it's not. This is just the stories that I've heard, and they seem to be backed up by another channel that reveals a lot of this. Okay, guys, it is my beautiful wife's birthday today, and I need to go spend some time with her. But I did want to share this with you, and I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think of all this. And do you think the Hollywood Illuminati, the cult of Baal, and living, roaming, shape-shifting demon creatures are real? Do you think that's a possibility, that they are here on planet Earth with us? Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.